Hello and welcome to episode 12 of NoiseMap. It's astonishing to me that we've got this far without discussing one of the most useful features of NoiseMap, which is the labelling system. So I think it's time that we had a look at that. I'll load up the manual example database. That's the one that comes with NoiseMap, and you can obtain it from your NoiseMap help menu. So we'll open that. Of course, as you know, when it connects at first, it doesn't tell you very much. But if you go to Database Preview and connect to the base scenario and load that. And there we have the basic manual example model that you're all familiar with. You'll see that at this stage, we've got a picture, but what is it a picture of? Well, before we can really understand that, we need to select some objects. So let's select this piece of road here. If we double click, there we have a name. I'll put it over here. And you can use these buttons to scroll along the object. And we have the name of the object here, the road. But of course we don't know what the name of any other object is, although that is labelled. That has got a name there. That's his Ashdown Road. What's this called up here? Still Ashdown Road. What's this called down here? And that is Ashdown Road, south of Victoria Road. So there are labels on there. But what about the rest of it? What are all the other objects in the model? It's quite cluttery. Can we make it easier to see? Well, the first thing is that yes, we've got the visibility button here, the view button. And you can turn off all the objects. They're all still there. We can even see that that object down there is selected, but we can't see the object. In fact, if I press escape to unselect, I can't now select any object because they're not visible. And you cannot select an object unless you make it visible. So let's make the roads visible. Once we've made the roads visible, then I can select a bunch of roads. Let's select all the roads in the area of this roundabout. Click here and drag. They all turn into dotted lines because they're all selected. And if I click on the Properties button, there it tells me that I've selected 38 road segments. They're actually all in the category of existing road segments, but they don't all have the same name. The identifier is blank because they're not all the same. And there's many other of their properties which are not all the same, so NoiseMap can't give you those. Fine, but supposing we really would like to see a bit more information. Let's turn a few more objects on. Let's click down here. And you can see that all the various objects that you can have. Let's turn the roads off, but let's put the outlines on. Now, amazingly, a huge number of objects appear because there are many types of outline in NoiseMap. Outlines are not noise generating objects, noise sources. They help to understand the map. They're not receptor points either, but they do help us to understand the map and what we're looking at. And if we look at it, we can see we've got the edges of the roads and various other lines scattered about, including these horizontal lines here. Well, what are these? Of course, as you know, if you click on any object, its properties will open. And we can see that this is just a line type 1. It doesn't actually have any height. A line can't have a height. and in this case it's got no identifier, it's just the line. But if I choose another line nearby this, what has that got? Well, it's a sheet cut line. If I was printing this out on a large sheet of paper, where do the sheets match from one to the next? And that's what that shows. And that's a line type 2, whereas remember that the road outlines were line type 1. Actually, you can use the line types for anything, it's just a way of separating them out, and we'll see that in a minute. Now when you select an object, it's not always that easy. That's because NoiseMap places the line in the map at its centre. So if you click on the ends, it's unselected it. If I click at the other end, it's actually selected this other line. Well, let's have a look at this other line. That's actually a line type 3. Again, it's got no identifier, it doesn't actually say what it is. So if I want to select this long line again, I've got to guess where the middle is and click where I think the middle is, and that's selected it, and it's called a sheet cut line. What about these horizontal lines up here? What are they? Well, let's click on one. That says Ashdown Road. It doesn't look to be a road, does it? Let's click on the line underneath. Ah, junior school. So it's Ashdown Road, junior school. I hold down the shift key so I select them both. Of course, the identifier disappears. Right, now it's perhaps a bit of a nuisance if I can only see them by clicking on them one by one. They're all set in the view display options. And this sets the visibility of all the objects. By clicking on the eyeball button in the toolbar is the same as opening this, switching these on and off. So if I switch them all on, the whole map has come back. If I switch them all off, I have to click OK. So it's not as convenient, but it does allow me to do rather more. So if I click on View, Display Options again, I noted that it tells me that F2 is the shortcut, so I'll use that next time. Let's turn the outlines on. You'll see that there's another box here, Outline Types. And here's a list of all the outline types, from buildings and areas of water and just general areas, through 3 different line types, address point, which are the post office postal address locations, and 3 types of annotation. And they're all switched on at the moment. So let's click OK and OK. They're switched on, but the labelling isn't there. Why is that? Press F2 and go to Labels view. And here you can see that we can choose exactly what is labelled. Let's play with the outline labels. So we'll go to the outline labels and check ident string. That's the text label of the object. And again, click here. We can label just objects that are of interest. At the moment, we'll label all the object types. OK. And click OK. And now all the labelling has appeared. So let's have a look at these. To zoom in a bit so we can actually read them. Ashdown Road Junior School. Here, public convenience and a pavilion. Here we have the sheet cut line. The label disappears while you're moving. That's just so the drawing can redraw more quickly when we're scrolling around. King Charles Secondary School. Let's zoom out. I'll press page down. I'm in move mode, so I can just drag. These are the address points, they're shown in red. There's the sheet cut line, and here you can see the road names. Here, a name for the industrial area, and then a name for individual buildings, and some more road names. Labelling can take up a lot of space on a drawing, and it can very quickly get crowded. So NoiseMap has a number of tools that will help you to be selective over what's viewed. So if we go to the display options window, the shortcut F2, and look again at the options here, there's one option which we haven't looked at yet, which is the general one. Now this enables us to alter the size of the characters on the screen. We can make lines thin and thick. I normally set those to thin. Characters are quite small and thin. We can also use a narrow typeface, and there are a couple of other options here which are really to do with difficulties that you might have with certain computers or operating systems, although I think that modern operating systems and graphics cards are pretty reliable. I use the alternate add objects cursor and the software fill because they seem to work better. You've got the same choice of options for the printer. This was designed mainly for use with pen plotters because pen plotters can have difficulties. They're using wet ink and that can make holes in the paper, although you might find it useful if you're using a PDF printer to refine the drawings. The grid label size is also adjustable for the printer because very often you only want those to be small. When you're printing on a very large sheet of paper, you don't want them to come out too big. You can adjust here the grid size, which is set to be 500 meters square by default, and also the angle of rotation. That enables you to define an exact angle of rotation. Again, can be useful when you're producing presentation drawings. So returning now back to the labels view, there are here some tools which enable you to shorten space taken by the labeling. You can have the orientation of the label along the line of the object. That's normally the best way to do it, but you can choose to have horizontal or vertical. Sometimes that might be neater. For some of the labels we can ask it to use more than one line, and we can shorten the labels. We can ask it to use more than one line, particularly useful if it's a fairly short object. Or we could just truncate the labels on short objects so that they don't overshoot into the next object. And one that I find particularly useful is only labeling the currently selected object. That has the advantage that when you click on an object, you see its details, but they don't get in the way otherwise. For railway trains, we can also add, or instead of the tracks, we can label details about the train services on each of the tracks. That can be useful in some cases. I'll have a look at that. The activities is a similar thing. You can label your model with details of the number of plant being used in an activity, the type of plant, its category, speed and flow rate. And then finally for receivers, you can select which result to display on the labels. Again, a very useful thing to be able to do. So these are worth exploring when you want to produce a drawing for specific purposes, or possibly when you want to do a bit of troubleshooting. Let's have a look then at train services. So I've put those on, click OK, but it's only label the currently selected objects. At the moment we don't actually have any train services showing, so we need to switch those on. We'll need to zoom in. Then if we go to select mode and select, and there we have a label. Now this might be one where it'd be a good idea to have this on several lines because it gets in the way, doesn't it? So let's go back, press F2, and in labels view use multiple lines. That's a bit easier to see, isn't it? It goes in the direction in which you have put the segment. So there we are. That's really quite useful. You can see all the services on that piece of track. So there are a lot of nice little features in NoiseMap to do with labelling, and I suggest that you explore them when you have a moment and you're looking for something to do while you're drinking a nice cup of tea. Thank you very much for listening and watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye bye for now.